you so much, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. In these dying days of GA4, we're going to talk about, let me just fire up the slides here. We'll get back to it. There we go. We're going to talk about how to back up your UA data and moving forward with reporting in GA4. So my name is Ameet. I am a product manager for Analytics Canvas. I've been doing this for a long time, 12 years now here at AC. Helping people to automate their data workflows, primarily with Google Analytics. That's been our specialty. I've been working on the GA4 API since 2020, when we first launched our connector, when it was just first available. It took a long time for people to show up and start using it, but here we are now, working hard on GA4 as well. So today, first to tell you a little bit about us. Canvas is a no-code data prep software for Google Data Tools. What that means is that we have an environment for users to work with Google Analytics data, process it, and send it to wherever they need it to go. We have been doing this since 2010. So we have, I think, unparalleled expertise in this industry about working with this very difficult API, the Universal Analytics API, and with all the challenges on GA4. We were the only developers to build a BigQuery-based solution, a BigQuery editor on the UA backup, the UA 360 dataset. Now there's the GA4 BigQuery dataset. Of course, we've got amazing tools for that as well. That slide should be updated. Ever since launching the UA backup utility, we now have customers in over 45 countries around the world. It has been a heck of a ride for us. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to be talking about why you should back up your data. I know Phil touched on that in the intro a little bit there, but we'll dive into it. Some of the primary reasons, the 3 top reasons that we have been seeing of why people are backing up their data. We'll then talk about how to do it. So what are your options in these final 20 days, 19 days left that we have? I'll show you a demo of the tool that we came up with. So here at Analytics Canvas, again, we've been doing this for a long time. We came up with this idea of having a dedicated UA backup utility. I'd love to show it off to you guys today. We also added a Looker Studio dashboard. I know we saw in Andre's presentation earlier, people want to visualize this data. They told us loud and clear that having just some data wasn't enough. They needed a way to interact with their historic data sets. So we've attached one of those to the demo as well, or to the product as well, and I'll be demoing that. Then we'll talk about transitioning your reporting from UA to GA4. So now that we've got our UA data, how do we kind of integrate it as best we can with GA4? And then how do we move forward with our GA4 reporting? There's some challenges on the reporting side that I'm going to touch on, and then we can get into some Q&A, answer any other questions that you guys might have for us today. All right, so let's start with this. Why are we backing up our UA data? Well, Google has said, first of all, that they're going to be destroying this data as of July 1st, 2024. And if there was any question about when or if Google would extend this, believe me, we would love it if they did. We would benefit tremendously, but unfortunately, they are not going to. They did send out a partner communication last week. It is very clear they want this data off their books. As Phil was showing earlier, this data costs them a lot of money. I don't know exactly what the number is, but it costs them an awful lot. There is some risk on their side to continue to hold it. They're not going to do it. They are serious this time. Your data is going away. It will be gone as of July 1st. Really, what they're saying is the first week of July, they'll start deleting data on July 1st. It will be gone by the end of the first week in July. So they're telling you loud and clear, hey, export your previously processed data before this date. So we've got to get this data out within the next 19 days. Okay, but that's why we have a deadline, but why would we want this historic data? So I get this question a lot. Analysts will bring their management on the phone and they'll say, yeah, great, it's a nice solution, but why would we do this? And that kind of stumps me because as an analyst, someone who's been working with data my entire career, to me, it's so obvious. The number one reason is historical data analysis. We cannot do this kind of historical data analysis if we don't have history. It can tell us a lot about how a website performed, a lot about how campaigns performed, how seasonality affected our website. There's so many reasons why historical data analysis is important to web analytics as it is for every other industry. But it doesn't just apply to GA, of course. Your Search Console data deletes every 16 months. There's a 16-month rolling history on that. Some of your UA data in the web interface does delete after 14 months. So there are other pieces of data that you may wish to capture from GA4. And other platforms have data retention policies as well. So for me, number one is we need our historical data. It should be together in one place, and that's going to be a huge benefit for analysts both today and those who come to the site in the future or come into the role in the future and need to look back at historical performance. The number 2 reason that we're seeing loud and clear is policy. So check with your organizations, especially on the education side, the government side, healthcare. We've got a lot of healthcare companies coming through. they need that data, especially agencies where they were paid for performance. They want history of that data as well. And they are told by their agencies and by their clients that they need to keep this data for a period of at least 5 years. And that's the typical mandated history that we see is 5 years worth of historical data. Now, some people are going all the way back, not quite to 2006, but we have seen them going back as far as 2007. But for sure, the number 2 reason is policy. Now, the third reason people are coming to us to get their GA4, their UA data is because they want to blend it together with GA4. Stakeholders, as I'm sure all of you on the line today have lived through, stakeholders who aren't intimate with this process and aren't really up to speed with what's going on with UA and GA4, they don't want to see a whole new set of reports. They don't want to see just reporting that starts perhaps as late as June 2023. I know some people didn't turn on their reporting until that date, but they don't want to see that. They want to see the full history. They want to see the reports continue to look how they looked, and they need to be gradually converted over from UA to GA4. So blending is the third most popular reason that we see. Now, I stole this from the Measure Minds guys. This is the image that they put out in the email. And this is great. I wish I had built something like this myself. I've been doing this presentation now for, 14, almost 15 months. This is a great slide that summarizes some really excellent reasons why you would want to retain your historical data. Okay, so what should we back up then? We get it. We need to back up our data. Google has said there's no one-click solution. We have found that the Google solution is, their sheet is very, let's say, lightweight. It's not very comprehensive, I wouldn't say. So what should we be backing up? The number one thing I've been telling people is look at your existing dashboards and reports. That's probably what your stakeholders are most used to seeing. That's probably where you spend most of your time when you're doing your own historical analysis. So take a look at that first and see what's in there. That should be your starting point as to what you should back up. When you're considering, if you're considering blending your UA and GA4 data together, take a look at which metrics and dimensions apply to you and can be blended. Then we'll look at anything that you or your stakeholders or colleagues might be looking at in the web interface. So the easy way to do this is log into the web, go to the reports section, go to custom reports, see what people have built, and ask your stakeholders, ask your team, what are you guys using? Which ones are the most important to you? And make sure you capture those reports in your backup. Now, this is kind of a broad-reaching one, but it's anything that you may want to analyze again in the future. This data is going to be gone. So, maybe you're only looking at things like site speed every once in a while, but this is your last chance to get that data. So that's maybe something that you wish to get. So take a survey of what you have been looking at, things that have come up over the years, and then make sure you dial that into your backup. And then finally, anything else mandated by your organization or client. Those of you who are agencies, please check with your clients. They may have certain expectations about what is being backed up. You want to make sure that those are captured in your backup as well. While we do have some programmatic solutions, others do as well. The schemas that all of us develop, they're very generic, right? We can't know exactly what each client wants. Every site is bespoke, and so we need to make sure that the client has exactly what they are looking for. So how far back should you go? I mean, you could go all the way back to the beginning, but in a lot of cases, that doesn't make sense. There is a limit to where the historical data will make sense for you. We like to say that you should go at least as far back as the last major website redesign. So if you significantly changed the site, tagged it completely differently, reassigned gold numbers, scrapped your custom dimensions and metrics and started all over again, the historic data beyond that point is going to be basically meaningless, at least for those categories, because there's no timestamp on it, right? If you change a dimension or a goal number, it's the same goal number regardless of when, and it might have a different meaning. So at least as far back as the major website redesign. Now, I say the second point is as far back as Google will allow. There is something called data retention. There's a data retention policy that someone, either yourself or someone else with access to the site historically, they may have put a data retention policy in place. If they've done that, you can only get so much data. I've got a slide about that in just a second. And then the third point is as far back as your budget will allow. Now, our solution is very low cost. Yes, there's some free tools out there. The free tools don't work for a lot of people, and neither does our $198 price point or $99 price point. Some of you have a lot of data. We have done billion plus row backups. They are huge. And you've got to decide for yourself, hey, am I going to spend the $3,000 to $5,000 on this backup or $7,000 on this backup? Or can we narrow this down to something that's more reasonable, making some trade-offs about what we actually get so that it fits within our budget, okay? Now, those data retention settings, if someone flicked this switch at some point on your site, it's going to be tough to get all your data. the retention setting applies from the day they activated that setting forward. It is on a rolling basis, so the data is already gone. We have had some people ask and say, hey, well, I went back in and I turned it back on again, or I turned it off. So where's my data? Sorry, Google is actually purging the data on a day-to-day basis. They're not keeping it and just hiding it from you. The data is gone. What's worse is they don't really give us a list of what dimensions and metrics are what would fall under these data retention settings. We were surprised by it. Customers continue to be surprised by it. There are things like campaign dimensions. There are year month for some odd reason. When you have just year month instead of date in certain queries, suddenly you get data retention applied. So the key with this is that you've got to make really, really simple queries to get larger and more historic data when you have a data retention policy in place for your site. Otherwise, you'll only have the details for one of these periods, whatever it is that someone decided when they enabled that policy. Okay. Other things to consider in your backup. So we got to say that no backup is complete until you've done your own analysis and audit on it. Again, nothing is bespoke. Sorry, everything is bespoke. Nothing can apply equally to everyone. We do have our standard tables, but of course, your site is going to be different. So those of you who are agencies and consultants, you're going to do projects for your clients. This is a great checklist to go through to make sure that you're covering things off. Check out the custom dimensions, see which ones are important to them, and then determine, can these custom dimensions be applied to the existing schema, or do we need to make separate queries for it? Because custom dimensions are tricky. If they aren't set in a query, you'll get no data. It's not that you'll get blank data for just the custom dimensions or a blank row. You'll get nothing in the response set. So be very careful with those custom dims. Check out the goals. Not everyone used all 20 goals, 1 to 20. Most solutions, including ours, will give you a solution that will give you goal numbers 1 to 20. If you don't need all of them, that's an easy way to dial back on your backup. Okay. Audit for events. This one was kind of took me by surprise. I didn't think that the event tables would be the biggest ones for most people, but some people have really defined a lot of events in their workflows and in their setups. And so these tables tend to be quite big. Make sure that you're capturing the right dimensions and metrics together with the events that are on your site so that the backup makes sense. Okay. And then for other categories, things like audience and demographic reports, this wasn't enabled for all sites. If you didn't enable it, the data won't be there. If you did enable it, there will be some data, but oddly enough, the more dimensions you add to the table, the less data is returned. And this is because Google's trying to anonymize the data, make sure that you can't identify any individual person. And so these are really great tables to have if they're available to your account. If they are available, you're almost better off getting the low level of detail. In fact, we give you the low level of detail to begin with because it will result in more data. So experiment with that, see if that's part of your site before dialing in your backup. Finally, for segments. So I know a lot of people have applied a lot of segments to their accounts. They tend to look at segmented reports specifically. The data that we are providing that we're getting out of the API by default doesn't have any segments applied to it. You would have to apply your own segments to it individually, and that will be a separate set of tables. So if you want a report that has segments on it, you have to add that to each of your backups to each of the tables. That report will only be for the segmented data. So if you want the raw view as well, you'll have to create a second backup for that. Okay. All right. So that's the what do we get? Why are we getting it? Now, how do we get this out? Well, Google's got a few tools available to us. The first is the web UI, and they're saying, go ahead, log in there and download your reports one at a time, file save as, and then save either to PDF or to Sheets in 5,000 row increments. Throw this one out the window. This is way too time consuming. If you're on this call, you're a professional in this space, this is not worth your time. The second one is the BigQuery export. That one was only available to 360 customers, of course. It is still a nested data model. You need to know an awful lot of SQL to get that data out and to ask questions of it later. So while it was, yes, it's a backup, it's not usable by most analysts. And we see a ton of 360 customers still coming through today who are asking for these flattened tables in a modeled structure so that they can look at this data later on. Google's not offering this anymore. So if you are a 360, even if you're a 360 customer, if you didn't already turn this on, you're out of time. They will not give you that 13 months worth of history. So the last option is the API, and that's where commercial tools come available. Some of them are free. Google has made one available as well that connects to the API through Google Sheets. Then, of course, there's tools like Analytics Canvas. Now, there's a whole long list of challenges with reporting against this API. I'm not going to take you guys through every single last one of them. It's a lot. If you're thinking, well, oh, hey, I'll just rope up some code and get this myself, this is an hours and hours and hours long process, possibly even days, depending on exactly what you need to get back. And that's just to make the initial connection. Once you start making your queries, you'll have questions about why they don't make sense. It's because there's a lot of things to consider here. So again, we've considered it all over the last 12 years. We've baked that right into the app. You don't have to worry about any of this. You just have to go ahead and make your queries. Okay. So the bottom line at this point, 19 days left, you've got to use an off-the-shelf solution. Use someone's tool that already connects to the API, either a free tool or one that's a commercial offering. You'll have a much better ROI spent on your time to be able to get the data that you need than trying to build everything yourself or trying to do this manually. All right. So let's take a look at the Analyst Canvas backup solution. We have been building this engine again since 2010. So while we used to have a desktop and server product that still worked very, very well for those of you who want to run things on your own machines and keep things out of our cloud, we've got an awesome tool for you to do that. You do have to build your own queries, but we've got a model for you to help you along. But our UA backup utility, this new utility that we spun up starting just about a year ago, this is a rocket ship. This was designed strictly for extracting UA data at scale across large sites. I won't say that, so today now, we are so overwhelmed that it's not quite as fast as it used to be. If you had come just a month ago, your backup could have been done in as little as an hour. Right now, it's taking a couple of days before it even hits the server. And some of the backups are too big, they just won't run in time. And so we're going back and tuning them down a bit. But the engine is fired up. It's firing on all cylinders. We're trying to add lanes even as we speak. The team is hard at work trying to add more capacity because this thing is just rocking. It's running super hot right now. All right. The best thing about this, two latest editions, the Looker Studio report, that has been overwhelmingly well received. People are quite happy with how quick it is to get the data there. And then our publish options, being able to get the data into BigQuery at a very affordable price. I know some competitors are charging a wicked premium just to get your data to BigQuery. Not here, not us. It's the same price as getting your data to Sheets, CSV, or Excel. And yes, it is a commercial offering, but I truly believe that is the most affordable pricing in the industry. For as little as $99, you can get a backup. Your configuration time can be as little as 15 to 20 minutes. There's no manual steps, no trying to stitch everything together. The tool is going to do all of that for you. If you want the dashboard, adds about $100, but again, gives you a 20-page Looker Studio report to dive into your data and to make sense of it. And even better, to deliver to your stakeholders without you having to build your own biz tool on top of it. All right, let's get right into the demo, see how this thing works. I'm going to assume that we're not going to go through the whole sign up and sign in process. Once you have created your account, logged into Canvas, come on over to the UA Backups menu. Here, we'll see that you can add your backup to any data location that BigQuery supports. Canvas is built on the Google Cloud. We are hosting your data in Google BigQuery, and so the data has to be in a data location that is acceptable to you. So go ahead and pick the data location that makes sense for you and build your backup there. Okay, I'm going to build mine here in the US, and we'll call this just the GA4 word, if I can spell. There we go. First question is, do you want the dashboards? And if you say yes, we will include them in your report. You got an opportunity to sample the dashboards here. So I've already opened the samples. Here's the PDF version of it, which is just a printout. This is often easier to send to stakeholders and to management, just because it's easy for them to open a PDF and go through it. They don't have to log into Looker, and they don't have to wait for things to load. If you're using our BigQuery preview, though, it's rocket fast. So this loads very, very quickly. We'll just go to any of the pages here, and we'll see that this is going to load at the speed and power of BigQuery. If you're using the Sheets connector, it's a little bit slower. It might take 3 to 5 seconds to load the page, but hey, look, even BigQuery is struggling from time to time, although it loaded everything else very, very quickly there. All right, so that's where you can see the report. Take a look at it, see if you like it, see if you want to include it. You can, of course, click on any of the tiles here to see more about what the report is like that gets included in your backup. All right, next we'll pick our data categories. These are modeled off of the GA3 or the Universal Analytics Reporting API v4. So these are the data categories that apply to each group of dimensions and metrics. You can select one or more of these to include, and we'll add some default tables so that you don't have to build them from scratch. And the tables that we are building here are modeled off of the UA web interface. So if you go into the UA web interface and you look at the reports that are on the left-hand side, we have built very much those same tables, or that we built the tables that will produce those same results in those respective data categories. Here we ask you to tell us where you want this data to go. If you select BigQuery, great. We are going to give you a much more detailed backup. If you select Sheets or Excel, Now we've got some row limits to contend with. There's hard limits on sheets in Excel about how much data we can put in each sheet and in each table. And so we will give you a lower level of detail if you ask for any one of those other two. Okay. Excel, of course, not available if you're choosing the dashboard. The dashboards only work for BigQuery and Sheets, and that's because we use the Looker Studio linking API. That API only supports those two data sources. Okay. So here, again, we can choose more than one profile or more than one view, rather, to back up if we don't have the dashboards. The dashboards are single view only. Sorry to disappoint. The dashboards are single view only. And so if we're choosing the dashboards, we can only choose one view at a time here. Right, then we're going to scan the property and tell you just how much data is available. This one goes all the way back to 2009 and finishes in 2023. It's got about 1.26 million sessions. Again, you can change that time range. It's going to affect the overall cost. It's going to affect the speed and how long it takes to back up, especially if you've got a larger site. All right. Next, we'll go to the table library. Here is that completed library already done for you. You do not have to worry about modifying or configuring these tables. We show you what the schema is, and now we start our estimate engine. Why the estimate? Again, some of your sites are tiny. Some of them are in the billions of rows. We have to price based on how much effort it's going to take, how much capacity it's going to take on our side to run your jobs. And the best number that we could come up with was the total number of rows that were delivered. So that's a good proxy for us about how much your backup's going to cost. Now, you don't have to wait here while this estimate is running. You can continue to review your backup and set things up. Anything with a Looker Studio icon, that means that it's part of the Looker Studio report. The only thing we let you do is remove it. You cannot edit it. We tried that before. People tend to change the queries in such a way that it breaks the reports. So we've locked them for editing. You can only build your own custom tables and attach them to it. But if it's got the Looker Studio icon, that table is what it is, and that's what we're going to deliver. Okay. Down here are all those other tables. And as I mentioned earlier, it lines up with the UI web interface. So here we've got our acquisition to all traffic channels daily detailed report. Okay, and then here you can see exactly what's in that report. You can edit this, you can modify this as you see fit. Let's click the edit button. You can change the level of detail. So if you're worried that your backup is too expensive and you need to trim the size, you could change it from, or if you're subject to data retention settings, you can change it from high detail to say low detail. We get rid of those high cardinality dimensions and we'll run the query again. Now you lose some detail, right? That's just the fact of it, but it might help your backup to go through and help you to control those costs. You can also change the time granularity. This is the biggest and easiest way to save on your backup and to get it down to something more reasonable. Instead of say days, you can choose say weeks or months, and that is going to considerably change the size of this backup. Okay, so if you're running into pricing concerns, that is the easiest lever to pull to reduce the size of your overall backup. You can also convert this to a custom query and say, great, I actually want to add my custom dimensions to this. So then you'll add your custom dimensions or your custom variables, whatever makes sense for your site, right? Back to those segments, you can apply any of the segments that you want. It'll apply to this table in particular, not to all the tables. So if you want those segments, you can apply it to any table that you want it to apply to. Same with filters. If you want to apply filters, maybe you've got some bot traffic or some known host names that you want to include or exclude, you'd add the filter here on your on each table. All right. That's it. Once we're done this step and the estimate is complete, we can move on to the next step. I'm not going to make you wait. It's going to take a little bit of time. We need to get that estimate right because we guarantee you the lower of the estimate price or the final delivery. So if the final delivery is lower than what we estimated, we're going to refund your credit card starting July 1st. If it is higher than we estimated, hey, happy day for you. You get the extra data. Okay. So let's look at one that's already been configured and already has the estimate run. I'm going to hop over to the export options. Here we can determine where we want this data to go. You're either selecting a Google Sheet. In this case, it's going to tell us you can't do Excel because we've got the dashboard, or you're selecting BigQuery. If you're an agency, strongly recommend you set up the client's BigQuery and write your data into the client's BigQuery. That way they're going to own the backup and the dashboard forever. It's going to be in their account and you don't have to worry about data transfer. If you're out of time and your client's out of time, yes, you can put it into your account and then move it later. Just a bit more work. And typically we want to keep the work to the minimum on this one. Okay. So you'll just send them our Google Cloud Service account. You'll ask them to give you permission on the project and to set up a data set and give us permission to write into that data set. Okay. Documentation is all right here. I've got videos, step-by-step guides, really, really helpful stuff right there on the website. Right. And you'll choose where to put that backup. And it'll say, great, we're gonna deliver to that data location. Canvas right now is checking the BigQuery account and it's saying, hey, is this actually set up for a backup? because those of you who wanted to use the free BigQuery, they will start in sandbox mode. Sandbox mode deletes your data after 60 days. So not much point in saving all this historical data, putting it in BigQuery, then 60 days later, it's all gone. So we run some checks at this stage. We make sure that your account is set up properly. If it's not, we prompt you, tell you how to change it. We've got some great articles in there, again, that show you the steps that you need to take to affect your backup so that we can, sorry, to affect your tables so that we can write into it. Your last step is to preview and purchase. Actually, sorry, preview. This was a preview and purchase. And in the 250 times that I've given this demo, there was a preview button there. As of yesterday, we had to pull the plug on the previews. There was just too many of them running. They were taking up some really valuable server capacity. And at this point, we just had to say, sorry, we've got so many examples, so many previews out there already. If you need to know what it looks like, come and contact me. I'll give you access to our Google Drive folder. You can see what it's like. I'll give you access to the BigQuery tables. So you can see what it's like, but we can't run your previews anymore. We're just out of time. So the option now is to go ahead with the purchase. You'll say review and purchase. We'll tell you one last time, how much is it going to cost, confirm where it's going, and then it's over to you to hit purchase and run. Okay. Now that backup is in our queue. And again, that queue is growing. I used to run this demo, and by the end of the demo, the backup would be done. Not anymore. It's going to take a few days just to hit the servers, then it's going to run, and then it's going to be delivered. Still only takes a few hours to run, but it's really standing in the line to get its slot on the server, and then it's going to get into motion. Okay, so let's look at one that's already been done. We'll take the demo clothing example here, pop that up. It's going to show me here's my data over in my Google Drive. So it's going to be in my UA backups folder. Okay, and then I've got a few examples in here, but this is effectively what it's going to look like. It's going to be in your folder. You'll have this data index. It'll tell you what is in each spreadsheet, which tables are in there, and how many rows there are. Okay, back over to Canvas. We'll go to the Looker Studio report and generate this report by clicking the Create Report button. If you want your client to own this, and if you've written into a shared drive that the client has access to, go ahead and hit copy report URL and give them that link. They can generate it on their own, and it'll be in their accounts fully. If you plan to white label it and do any changes to the report, generate it yourself first and then share it with your client. They can then make a copy, which then belongs to them. A couple quick tricks here for Looker Studio, really. Right now, we're not done. Even though it looks like the report would be done and in our accounts, it's not done yet. You have to go ahead and hit edit and save. Don't make any changes here. That'll send you off the rails and you won't actually own the report. Yes, it has viewers credentials for now. You'll want to change that to probably owner's credentials or a server's account if you're using BigQuery. That way we don't have to worry about individual access. We can control access at the Looker Studio report level. Click acknowledge and save. Now it's creating the copy of this report in your account, and you will own this copy. Now that you've got the share and the view button, this copy is now yours, and you can now work with this. So that's the backup in a nutshell. That's how the process works. You can see here there's a ton of these. Some sites are making multiple. Some people are just making multiple estimates and then going to their stakeholders and saying, here's A, B, C, and D. Let's pick which one based on our budget, based on our needs, and what we've dialed in here. Which one do we want to go forward with? So you can either, whether you're an agency or an individual, and you want to make as many backups, or sorry, as many estimates as you can, please go ahead. You don't have to wait until they complete. Again, that algorithm is going to be all running server side. So just dial in your estimates, come back after probably 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. Could be a little bit longer today as the backup is the queue is growing, and then you'll see what your estimated price is. Okay. That's it. That is our UA backup utility going straight from 0 to completed backup. I did the demo in 15 minutes. You could do the same and have everything up and running. No other manual steps required. When the job is done, the data is going to be in your accounts. You don't have to blend them back together again. They're all there in one or more sheets or in your BigQuery tables, and you're ready to go. Not quite. So once you've got this data, great, we've got the historical data. Now it's time to make these blended views. This is, again, the number 3 thing on our list of why people are backing up their data. This is important for stakeholders. They want to see how does UA and GA4 compare. So that's what we have on this side over here. They want to see how does it trend? When we went from UA to GA4, what is can we see a continuous line here so that when we affect our filters, we still see the data that we want to see? So this is the view that we have to set up, but how do we do it? So how do we blend this UA and GA4 data together? Well, this is a classic data exercise, right? We're going to start with our UA data, and that's here in our BigQuery table. This is a block. This is from Analytics Canvas, but it's going to work very much the same way regardless of what you're using. We're just building a data workflow. So in this case, we have our UA data in BigQuery. Now we have a similar table, right, built on with similar dimensions and metrics, but built off the GA4 API. We then have to add a calculation block here or do a little bit of data prep. We've got to rename the fields because, of course, in UA, it's called page views, and in GA4, it's called screen page views. So if we want that continuous line, the table has to have one column name and everything in it. So we've got to standardize it using a block here. Otherwise, you're doing this in SQL or in any other code that you're working with. All right, next we have to put some filters in place. This UA data, we want it to stop here at the end of June 2023, and then we'll start our GA4 reporting from that date forward, from July 1st forward. So these two filters make sure that the right data is passing through. We then union it together, put both of those two into a single table. Now at the end of this table, we have one table of data structured correctly with just the columns that we need, and we can now start to report on it. So then we add a Looker Studio table, or you send this off to however you get your data into Looker, whether it's BigQuery, Sheets, or something else. And now you can start building your reports off this data. All right. So that allows us to build these both comparison reports and these continuous reports so that we have that blended view. Our stakeholders are happy. We're happy. We can start to see trends. We can start to identify differences between them. I think probably one of the thing that most people see, we certainly saw this on our side, is that the UA data tends to record more sessions than GA4. And in our findings, it was that they were doing a much better job. GA4 was doing a much better job of filtering out the bot and spam traffic. So the key thing, though, is that they are directionally similar. The difference is going to be relatively similar across the board. If you see spikes like this, that's where we drilled in and found that there was some significant bot traffic during those periods, and that GA4 was doing a much better job of filtering them out than was UA. All right, so what are those dimensions and metrics that can be blended between them? There's not a lot. So Google publishes these 8 different categories. I've got a write-up about it on our blog here, so I've got it down at the bottom of the screen. I won't go through each one of them individually, but the bottom line here is there's not a lot that's the same, right? It is a different data model. Things are different between the two, but there are some core metrics, some high-level metrics, as well as the traffic attribution dimensions that can be blended so that you can have a good view of your historic and new GA4 data going together. All right, so then we get onwards with GA4 reporting. We've got this blend done. We're starting to work with the GA4 API, and now maybe we start to run into some limits. And we discover that, hey, GA4 reporting is not quite free. There are some limits in place. On the GA4, on the API side, we do have these new tokens that are in place that was a bigger issue back 2022, early 23. Now is only an issue for those larger sites. And then if you're using BigQuery, of course, now you're paying in real dollars. This is not a token system or a free with some limits. With BigQuery, you're actually going to be paying for this. Now, it might be nothing for a long time. Everyone's got that free credit. And then the queries themselves can be quite low if you do things the right way. But if you've got a big site and you've got a lot of people looking at your data, there's going to be some real costs on that side. Okay. So what makes this a challenge? Number one, it's a new data model. We all had to forget UA or at least put aside a lot of our learnings from UA and learn this entirely new data model. Queries are much harder. Knowing which ones are compatible is a very real thing. You will get the wrong results if you add the wrong combination of dimensions. In some cases, Google will stop you from doing it. The API will stop you. In other cases, they won't. For those kind of cases, in our tool, at least on the BigQuery side, we'll throw up some errors and some warnings telling you what's going on with this query. But otherwise, you're on your own to kind of figure it out, right? Again, the costs either in the token side, if you're doing a heavy amount of development in a day, you may end up just being in a timeout, right? You'll hit that token limit and you won't be able to do any further reporting until you get more tokens available. All right, so within GA4, though, there's 4 different what Google calls reporting surfaces. So just to throw some new terminology at you, there's 4 different reporting surfaces. They are the reports interface, the explorations interface, the API, and BigQuery. These are distinct data sources. They do have differences between them in terms of what dimensions and metrics are available. There are differences in what is captured within them and what is going to be available to you as a user. The reports is the highest level. It's aggregate data. It's the one that doesn't have the data retentions limits applied to it. Explorations as well in the web interface does have the data retention limits applied to it. So we do have to be careful about that. Only 14 months of data within explorations. The API fed off of reports, so it doesn't have those limits, but it doesn't have all the granular detail as the BigQuery export. BigQuery, the export, has its own separate collection mechanism. it has a lot of more rich data that you will not get in GA4 reports or through the API. The difference primarily is between collected data and connected data. Connected data is all the other stuff that Google will bring into the reports together. Things like your Search Console data, your Google Ads data, those are being brought into the GA4 reports, including with the API. They're not present in the BigQuery export. The BigQuery export is really just the raw hits collected event level data collected by Google Analytics and stored in the Analytics BigQuery tables. Okay. So just another quick comparison. This I'll kind of breeze through quickly and leave the slides for those who are interested in looking at them later. In the top portion here, we have the aggregate detail. So both the reports interface and the GA4 data API. This is for aggregate higher level reporting. The explorations is for much more detailed level event level analysis. And the BigQuery tool, of course, is the richest source of that event level detail. And it doesn't have that 14-month history. Once the data is loaded into BigQuery, it's theirs. It's yours to keep forever. You won't have to go through this GA4 backup exercise as you did with UA if your data is in the BigQuery export. Okay. Now, sorry for the PTSD, but this happened in November 2022. I'm sure a lot of you woke up and saw this in your reports and were like, what the heck do we do? What does it mean that this data set has been accessed too many times and that we've hit these token limits? This is what that token system is all about. So the reason why Google is doing this is because with all those reports connected to live to the API, it's putting a lot of pressure on it. You may have heard recently, about a year ago, Twitter started charging more for their API. Reddit started charging more for the API. There was all this discussion about how expensive APIs are to run and maintain. Google's solution was not to charge you for it, but rather to put this token system in place so that you could get the data that you wanted, but not ask for the same thing over and over again. Tools like Looker Studio, which are live connections to the API, they make a separate set of API calls for every chart element, for every element on the dashboard or report. So every chart, every table, every scorecard is making its own set of queries for every user. Now that is a huge amount of the data that's being sent over and over again, the exact same data. With the token system, Google's saying very clearly, don't ask us for the same data twice. Once we've loaded it and the data is golden, so it's past the 3-day period where data gets reprocessed rather, don't ask for it again. And that's going to keep your use of the API down. So they're saying you need to stage this data. So keep it out of the analytics servers. So once you've asked for it through the API, put it in BigQuery, put it in Sheets, put it anywhere you want to put it, but don't ask for the data from the API again. So the idea there is that we're going to load this history once. And what they want us to do is load this history once and then incrementally load it after that. That means if because of this 3-day reprocessing period, we can't just do a 24-hour load. What we have to do is every day ask for the last 3 days worth of data, removing that from the historic data set and adding the new data into it. This allows us to keep up to date with the API, asking for just a small amount of data, a reasonable amount of data, staying within those token limits, and then being able to serve our reports onwards from there. And again, they heard everyone loud and clear. They set the limits way too low to begin with and didn't give people any warning that it was coming. And as a result, people got very upset. So they increased those limits dramatically. They started at about 2,500 tokens per day. They're now at 14,000. That's a lot, or per hour rather. They're now at 14,000. It's a lot. The only people who are now struggling with this are those with very large websites. Okay. Now, reporting on the BigQuery export, I know there's some hesitation to get started. It seems like a complex model. There are new tools coming out all the time. There's new articles coming out all the time, videos about how to use it. So this is getting much, much easier to work with. And it has some great advantages. Number one, it's free, quote unquote. Everybody can turn this on. You don't have to be a 360 customer. And for most of us, it's not going to cost anything. The costs are going to be very, very low. It's really the larger websites that are going to incur some costs for this. It is the data set that analysts have been asking for and have wanted so desperately when they were on UA. It's got the user and session ID in it, which allows us to really create funnels, create segments, and understand how users are really progressing through the site. We don't have to guess anymore. We've got the actual IDs of users, and we can see how users and groups of users are progressing. On building your own segments, the segments aren't available in the API or in BigQuery as they were in UA. Using the BigQuery export, you can actually build your own segments and create your reports off of that. Finally, BigQuery, super easy to integrate into dashboards and reports. Almost any modern tool is going to connect into BigQuery. Certainly all the popular ones, Looker Studio, Tableau, Power BI. they all have really neat connectors into BigQuery, and we'll be able to surface your data quite easily. Now, the downside, if you do the things the wrong way, if you connect your raw data to BigQuery, to Looker Studio, Tableau, or Power BI, and you have a lot of data, this can be a costly exercise. You need to talk to someone, read some articles, check out our blog on how you can reduce this cost and keep it to an absolute minimum. Most of our customers, we actually had a customer go from a $7,000 bill, which they got their wrist slapped for, to just their subscription fees now, which is $300 a month. It is a dramatic difference in costs when you just do things the right way versus cowboying it and going on to use this export without putting any controls in place. Now, one of the downsides, again, is that it does require SQL or some knowledge of the data model to be able to make these queries. That is becoming less and less of a barrier as tools like ours come out. Dataform, there's a new one coming out there as well. A lot of people in the analytics industry who are putting that together. That's going to really help people to understand and work with this data model a lot more cleanly. You still do need to understand the intricacies of the model, even though you don't need to know the SQL in order to understand the queries that you're making. Okay. Finally, the data is a lot more raw than people realize. You have to calculate a number of dimensions. So we take them things for granted in the API. Google spoon feeds us all this data. Here in the BigQuery export, it's raw. You have to make your own dimensions and metrics in a lot of cases. Anything that's a calculated dim or metric is it's up to you to calculate. Google's just not giving us the actual dimension. And in most cases, which is very frustratingly, they're not even telling us how they calculated those dimensions and metrics. So the traffic attribution stuff, incredibly difficult. Google acknowledges that it's difficult and that people aren't making the same queries that they're making, and yet they haven't published the model for us to follow. So still some challenges on that side. Final thing to say about this, there's no backfill. So if you haven't turned on your GA4 BigQuery export, today now is the time to do it because you will not get any historic data. The API's data model is completely different than the BigQuery export. They do not plug into each other in any kind of cleaned way. You do have to blend summary tables together to get your reports. So if you want this data, if you think it's going to be useful now or anytime in the future, go ahead and turn it on. The storage costs are next to nothing for the vast majority of sites. And by that, I mean, 1 or 2 pennies per month for a mid-sized site. The storage costs are not the barrier. It's the processing costs that are going to add up. And again, make sure you do things the right way. But you can start by just landing the data. There's not much there for people to play with anyways. They won't be making big mistakes. So get your budget controls and everything set up in the interim, but turn this thing on, get that data flowing. All right, so to wrap this up, today now is the time to back up your UA data, whether you're using our tool or anybody else's. This API is under historic load. We as vendors are under an incredible load. We launched this thing in June of last year, and in June and July we thought, hey, this is good. If this picks up, this is going to be great. And it kind of leveled off for a good long time. And then along came 2024. January was great. February was great. We're like, hey, this is good. Maybe by June things are kind of flatten out. No, there's a lot of people waiting for the last minute. To say we are overwhelmed is an understatement. We are not going to be able to serve everyone. That's the bottom line. The smaller ones definitely will get through, but some of these bigger ones, they just won't. There's just not enough time for them to run. They need to hit the maximum number of API calls per day, and there's just not enough days left to do that. So we've got to work with them to trim their backups and get them smaller just so that they'll run. And even then, likely we're going to be closing the door early for new orders so that we can process this backlog. Yesterday was a historic day, and we had already done more than half of yesterday's sales before I started this presentation. It's only 11 a.m. Eastern. So it's not a sales tactic. I'm not trying to drum this up, but you have to start acting now. If you did not back up your data yet, today now is the time. In terms of where to access you can keep this data, BigQuery is your best bet. Sheets is rickety. Big sheets are very hard to work with. If you're getting 10 million cells in a sheet, you're going to be sitting there waiting for that thing to open, try and connect a pivot table to that. What a pain. Connect it to Looker Studio, it's going to be really slow. Try and use BigQuery, super easy to set up. I've got some great resources for you. You can have it set up in 10 minutes or less. Get that BigQuery event export started. There's no backfill. That's the second biggest thing that people are coming to us for is the event export backfill. There's nothing to offer. And I know competitors are saying, hey, well, there's this thing we can do for you. There isn't. There's no equivalent of the event export. We can get the data from the API, no problem, but there's no way to get some of those fields that are in the event export. You've got to turn it on if you want that data. Finally, when you're getting into these reports, The event export doesn't cover everything, and the API covers a bunch of stuff that isn't in there. Don't think that it's a one or the other thing. You're going to be using both. If you turn on the event export, think in terms of using two different connections to power your reports. It won't be one or the other because not all data is in both places. Finally, really easy to blend your data between UA and GA4. There's only a limited set of metrics that are available, but definitely good to do to help your stakeholders to really see how the transition went from UA to GA4 and to stop them from asking all that questions about where is the historic data? What happened 2 years ago? You'll have it there if you blend your data now. And we'll take any questions if there are any.
Hi, Ameet. Yeah, we've got about 7 questions in there. So first question, do you have any documentation on moving the BigQuery as running out of time to get clients BigQuery access?
So I think I understand that one from Ian. So I think Ian, what you're saying is like you want to put the data in your BigQuery now and then move it to the client's side later because the client doesn't have it set up yet. It's taking them time to set it up. Yeah, so that's your question. We're hearing this more and more. The definitely put it into your own BigQuery if you're allowed to. If you have permission from the client to store it in your BigQuery, you can transfer it across later. We can transfer it across for you. Just let us know. We can't do it for everybody, but I know that there's a certain amount of people who do want this and who have hit that button now because they need to save it in their own. Once the data is in BigQuery, you can transfer from one BigQuery to another. It has to be in the same region. You can also reestablish the links in the Looker Studio report. So the critical thing is to get the data now so that at least you have it and that we can worry about transferring and connecting it to the right Looker Studio report later on.
Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. Another question from Ian. If you back up to Google Sheets, can you import later or import it into BigQuery?
Definitely. Yeah, it's so just like once we've given you the data, whether it's in Sheets or CSV or Excel, hey, it's just data, and BigQuery can ingest data from all kinds of different places. So there's definitely a way to get your data from Sheets into BigQuery once you've put it there. I guess the only thing to really take note of is making sure that you have the structure and schema correct. If you've used our tool, then we've got everything ready for BigQuery. So your sheets will easily go into BigQuery. There won't be things like spaces in the column names and special characters in columns that tends to screw up the load. So yeah, easy to get your data from Sheets into BigQuery later on. But
And
again,
there's
sorry.
a related question to that. Someone's asked, if they export to Google Sheets and then import into BigQuery, can the export to Google Sheets be after the 1st of July? Well, if it's cached in Google Sheets, then potentially yes, but they said, will that be costly?
Costly in terms of time. I'm going to put out a tutorial about this because I think there's enough people asking for it. It's about a 1 to 2 hour exercise. What you're doing is taking every single table from Sheets and then making an equivalent table in BigQuery and then uploading the data. We have an awesome data prep tool that does exactly that. I wish we had a template for it. We might just in the coming weeks. But really, it's just a matter of create the connection, link the two data sets, run the export. It's a manual process in terms of costly. Hey, you could do it in a free trial, no cost to you at all, as long as there's less than 1 million rows. If there is more than 1 million rows, there are free tools available, or you could use ours in our pro plan at $2.99 for the month and get the job done that way.
What's the deadline to use your platform? As you said, so there's a lead time in terms of.
So candidly, we are telling all of our agency customers that they need to hit our servers by by June 14th, and that we are most likely going to be, again, as of 2 days ago, our forecast was to close the door by June 20th for new orders. Yesterday was incredible. Today looks like it's going to be even more than that. So we might actually stop taking orders sooner than that. The smaller sites, again, we'll get through. Mid-sized to large ones, we are almost out of time. And then the queue is just too long. We have to stop orders so that we can process the ones that have been paid for.
Yeah, and I suppose also you don't know if Google servers are going to start going slow.
Yeah, we had we had an increased number of errors yesterday beyond what just the volume increase was. It was the API for a few hours was throwing back some erroneous responses, bricked a bunch of the backups that then had to restart. So for sure, we have to be aware of that too.
Yeah, people need to get their skates on. For how long will it? When will the? Well, so I think you kind of answered that. It says, how long will the offer be on? This is a crazy question. I mean, why? Like, it's almost like too cheap. Like, sort of $200 is just like.
Yeah. Our competitors, there was one who was charging $10,000 for a similar product, didn't have the dashboard and doesn't have nearly the schema that we had come up with. no UI controls to do it. So then the question is, how the heck did you guys do it for this price? Uh, we've had this engine for the last 12 years now. We've been working on this. This was our final hurrah for UA. We priced it very aggressively so that we could, one, deliver as much data as we could as fast as we could. We thought at this price point, people aren't going to hem and haw, and there's not going to be a lot of should we do it? But do we really have the budget for this? It was like, hey, we can do this for as little as $100. Let's just get it done. Second, it was a marketing ploy on our side. Absolutely, it was. We said at this, if we started charging $10,000 per backup, there'd only be a few people that we'd end up meeting, and we probably would have done an okay business of it, but we certainly would not have met the thousands of people that we have met as a result of this price point. The number of newsletters we've been in, the number of webinars we've been invited to, it's just been fantastic for us. So this was really about getting the word out as best we can, and that's a lot of what was behind the price point.
And I would add on that, it's really good that the client's not locked in, because in essence, it's their hosting the data on their Google Cloud account, assuming they can create a Google Cloud account.
Exactly.
So it's not.
And we
So
get
it's
asked
kind of
about that all the time. Like, hey, is there a subscription fee? Like, do we have to pay for your platform as well? And I did my best to message it everywhere that no, there's no extra cost. There's no subscription required. You just you get what you pay for with the UA backup utility, and it will be there for you right till June 30th to add to your backup. So if you've paid us $99 and only backed up 7 million rows, you can come back to June 30th and add 3 more million rows at no extra charge. So that offer is available to you as well. Sorry. Anyway, that's all that's to say, we need to get those orders in as soon as possible. There's not a lot of time left if you do want to add to your backup, but try and get them in as soon as you can.
Yeah. Because as we've discussed, the deadline's not going to move. If cookie consent is not given, do you still need to get user and session ID, or does it count as analytical data?
So I believe this relates to GA4. It sounds to me like more of a GA4 question. User and session ID is available in GA4, whereas in UA you had to set up your own custom dimension for a user and a session ID. Which, if you have it as custom dim, you can go and grab that. On the GA4 side, if cookie consent is not given, then you end up getting aggregate data. So you won't get user level detail. In the BigQuery export, what we're seeing is not set on the user ID. And you'll see a lot of info. You'll still see hits that occurred in that session, but you won't see a user ID associated with it. So you do get less data as a result. You get less detailed data when the user does not provide consent, but you don't lose everything.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. So in effect, cookieless pings.
Yeah.
Ricardo asked, when was the UA 360 BigQuery export deprecated? Well, I think
My understanding was that it was March of this year where they stopped offering the. It was either March or January. Google 360 put out a number of articles saying what was going to be reduced from UA 360 and how it was going to be sunset, and there was a number of things that were removed starting in January. I believe it was as of March if you signed on for 360, but Google would used to be able to give you 13 months of history. As of March, they were no longer doing that. So as my understanding is that as of today, you cannot get that 360 export turned on. And even if you did, it's only 13 months of data from when it started recording. So 13 months from today, rather. So not terribly useful, even if they were to enable it for you.
Okay, that's good to know. And we're almost out of time. We've got 5 minutes left. Well, I mean, I'm always going to say, I mean, is thanks for putting out a great solution that's cheap. Sort of solves the problem for most agencies.
For sure.
I have also just put a link to our kind of the affiliate landing page, just partly so we can track people from the event that have attended and signed up. So if you use that link just so we can attribute it correctly. Also, I'm just going to put the link to the feedback form into chat for access to Ameet's slides. We will be sending out the recording from today. It takes us a bit of time to sort of trim that, but we'll try and prioritize sending out your recording, just so people have enough time to kind of rewatch it and just go through the steps.
Sure.
I think also, if I suppose there's your Measure Slack community as well, Ameet. So I suppose people could also kind of sign up to that and ask you questions there.
Yes, absolutely. So you've got a, I don't know if you can find it publicly, but definitely if you send me an email, I will invite you to the Slack channel. It's a quick way to get help from others who've already done the things that you're trying to do, or to reach us. So you've got right now, you've got the website chat, which is off because I'm here in the presentation. You've got our support channel. We'll get back to you through Zendesk. Full team has the visibility there. And then we've got our Slack channel. That's primarily James and I who are living on the Slack channel, and we can get you pretty quickly during business hours.
Cool. Yeah, I've just put a link to the Slack
Oh,
channel. I
perfect.
think
Yeah,
it's people might need to click. I think you get the invite to accept that. Cool. Thank you again for doing that talk, Ameet, and
my pleasure.
for sponsoring.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.